Hello friends, welcome to E-Pathshala. I'm Shagun Sharma, Assistant Professor in Political Science in Government College for Girls, Sector 42, Chandigarh. The paper is Foreign Policy of India and the module is India-China Relations. India and China have shared long historical ties. Both the countries have been great civilizations. However, during the colonial period, both the countries suffered a serious setback. Both were agrarian economies. Now they are together considering the path of industrial growth. However, when both the countries became independent, the ties and relationship between the countries, it became very warm and cordial. The slogan of Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai, it grew and it spread throughout, and both the countries gave a common message of brotherhood. But the warmth in the relationships could not stay for long, and then India and China got indulged into Sino-Indian War of 1962. This module will apprise the readers to the various issues of disputes between India and China. India and China have been two main ancient civilizations that coexist. Later, the influence of imperialistic powers ended these cordial relations between the two. This module will inquire the causes of bitterness between the two. Various stages of their relations will be analyzed in detail. All the issues of dispute between the two will be highlighted in this module. The areas of cooperation will also be discussed. Discussion on various treaties, agreements, and high-level visits will also form the part of this module. Various stages of relations. For proper assessment and prediction, their relations need to be analyzed and evaluated. Their relationship can be studied in the following 6 stages: Golden Era, period of conflict, period of no relations, period of dialogue, era of cooperation, and a new beginning of cordial relations. The first decade of India-China relationship was of brotherhood and cooperation. The bond was so strong that the period is known as Golden Era. These relations were based on following reasons. India was the second non-communist country after Burma who recognized China after the Communist Revolution. It not only recognized it but also made efforts for its membership in UN. Despite America's opposition, India left no stone unturned in helping China finding a place in international conventions and organizations. Besides approving and supporting communist China, India adopted some other activities also in such a way that they forced both the countries to make friendship. The following 4 steps taken by India helped in strengthening the relations between the two nations. India opposed United Nations proposal of declaring China as intruder in relation to Korean War in February 1951 and supported Chinese policies. In September 1951, during San Francisco Conference, India refused to sign the peace treaty with Japan as China was kept away from this treaty. India was of the opinion that peace efforts in Far East will be useless without the participation of China. In 1953, at UN Council, India gave a proposal for prisoners of war keeping in view the Chinese policy, and India supported the merging of Formosa and some other islands into China. Such initiative from India side forged the friendly relations between the two nations. China also reciprocated by supporting India's perspective in case of Goa and Kashmir. The friendly relations between the two countries reached the climax when both signed an 8-year agreement on trade and mutual exchange in the context of Tibet. This agreement has reference of Panchsheel also. Both countries were having the similar views on world peace and other international issues. Both were against the imperialism and colonialism and were in favor of maintaining the freedom of newly liberated countries of Asia and Africa. The courtesy visits during this period by the leaders of both countries also played their role. The visits of prime ministers of both nations helped to increase cooperation and benevolence on the one hand and proved the opportunity to the leadership to understand each other's view on the other hand. During the period from June 1954 to January 1957, Indian Prime Minister visited China once and Zhou Enlai visited India 4 times. Besides, there were other official level visits. The above cooperative tendencies do not mean that there were no differences between both the countries during this period. However, amid all these signs of cooperation, both had differences on the following issues. The issue of Tibet was like a bone of contention between the two. With the rise of communist government since 1949, China was trying to merge Tibet into China. The communist China declared Tibet as its territory. India was ready to surrender its right in Tibet and acknowledge China as sovereign power, but keeping Tibet as an independent unit. However, defying Indian sentiments, China launched military action against Tibet on 25th October 1950. This strained the relations between the two. An effort was made to solve the clash of interests between both through the agreement of 1954, but Tibet faced an insurgency in 1959 and China tried to crush it by using power. As a result, 14,000 people from Tibet along with Dalai Lama took the asylum in India. The second issue of dispute was regarding the boundaries of the two in their respective maps. In 1950-51, China depicted nearly 50,000 square miles of Indian territory in its map as a part of China. India opposed this. China gave a plea that it was prepared by previous government, but after 4 years, similar maps raised the controversy. On August 21, 1958, India again raised the objection, but China denied to change it. Thus, Chinese activities have always been suspicious, and its expansionist policies have always been a matter of concern for India. Bandung Convention of Asian and African countries also saw the birth of mutually conflicting views of the two nations. India has always aimed at strengthening the politics in Greater Asia and Africa by giving China a due place. But contrary to that, China used the convention to establish its hold over Asia in the politics of Cold War and in probable Chinese-Soviet Union conflict. Consequently, at the end of convention, both emerged as competitors instead of emerging as one unified power in the politics of developing nations. During this period, India had doubts about China, but these were not very prominent. So overall, the period was a golden era of friendly relations between the two. Due to the revolt of 1959 in Tibet and consequently Dalai Lama's refuge in India, the relations between the two became strained, and after 1962, Chinese attack on India turned very complex. So, the period between 1959 to 62 was a period of rising conflicts and war. China claimed that the war was a consequence of India's expansionary policies and collision with imperialistic power. India refuted both charges leveled by China by saying that firstly, India recognizes Tibet as an independent state under China, and second, as per 1954 agreement, India has given up its additional national rights in Tibet. In the year 1958-59, China started infiltration in Indian territories. In 1955, China constructed a national highway in Aksai Chin area. In 1958, China captured some areas of India by infiltrating into Ladakh. In 1959, Chinese soldiers clashed with Indian soldiers. Initially, Nehru ignored it, stating it as an inaccessible terrain, but later worries of Indian policymakers increased. The two nations had confrontation on the issue of control over the Barahoti area in Central Asia. The area was in Indian side, yet China repeatedly expressed its control over the area. Indo-China War had both present and future consequences, which were as follows. The relations between India and China nearly ended and large parts of India was in Chinese possession. Taking advantage of this conflict, equations between Pakistan and China improved. India's international reputation and its non-aligned image were badly hurt. Nehru's world peace plans came to an end. India's foreign policy became more practical and objective than idealistic. India's relations with Western countries, especially with America, improved. After some inhibitions, Soviet Union also agreed to take India's side in India-China conflict. Period of no relations. This third phase of relations between the two was of approximately 15 years duration. and can be termed as a period of no relations. Though the two did not end their political relations, but both called back their ambassadors. India was the first to initiate it to show its displeasure against China's war initiatives. During this long period, the most important issue was border problem that remained as it is. In April 1976, India appointed K.R. Narayanan as its ambassador to China after a gap of 15 years. China reciprocated after some days. So, the period of no relations between the two ended. Period of dialogue. The period between 1976 to 88 is known as a period of new beginning between the two nations. This period was a period of normalization of relations. Mutual appointment of ambassadors was an indication that both were willing to improve relations. This process was further strengthened due to the changes in internal and external policies of the two nations. In this period, policymakers of both the nations changed. The relations between the two were affected by many internal and external factors like China's role in world politics got bigger and was acclaimed internationally. Another important factor was the increasing gap between India and former Soviet Union and increasing proximity between China and Soviet Union. Sino-American relations became strained. India already was having strained relations with America, so India and China came closer to each other. Above external and internal changes in both the countries started reflecting through mutual dialogue, courtesy visits and exchange. All this had a very positive outcome. Both broke their silence and started a period of dialogue. The period during 1976 to 1988 was very crucial from the point of view of cementing of relations between the two. In this period, there was progress on two important fronts. One was end of a long period of no relations and other was beginning of a series of confidence building measures for mutual cooperation. Though such dialogues could not resolve border issues, yet there were many other positive effects which led to the proximity between the two. Period of cooperation. The period during 1989 to 1998 was of importance and effective relations between the two nations. First, both shredded the neutrality in relations and stepped towards more dynamic relations. Second, both decided to have all-round development of relations. Third, both acted more realistically and took relations forward in a mature way. Therefore, in view of changing economic environment and internal situations, the leadership in both the countries tried to improve the relations with all sincerity. The improvement in relations between the two during this period was mainly due to various international events, internal situations and change in mutual outlook. During Rajiv Gandhi's visit, the most important thing to solve border issue was forming a joint working group. Indian Foreign Secretary and Chinese Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs led this group. This group had two main functions: to give suggestions for solving border issues within a time limit, to maintain peace along the line of control. For this, the group met every 6 months alternatively at the capitals of two nations. In case of bilateral issues, three important agreements were signed. Both nations agreed to cooperate in the field of science and technology. Both agreed to provide civil aviation services to each other, especially in the form of direct flights between Delhi and Beijing. There was a 2-year agreement on cultural cooperation which had provision to be renewed for 5 years. Therefore, Rajiv Gandhi's visit proved a milestone in many ways and took the relations between the two nations to a new level. In the same period, there were some unprecedented incidents of cooperation in the field of defense which further improved the relations between the two nations. For giving a momentum to confidence building measures, Chinese Prime Minister Li Peng visited India in December 1991. He was the first Chinese Prime Minister to visit India after a gap of 31 years. This visit strengthened confidence building measures and led to development of political cooperation. Both expressed their belief in the principles of Panchsheel and agreed upon equal participation in New World Order, disarmament, reduction in North-South differences, following the UN Charter and respecting human rights by all nations. To increase mutual trade, 3 trade agreements were signed. In this way, this visit encouraged trade and confidence building measures. During November 28 to 30, Chinese President Jiang Zemin, along with his Commerce Minister Wu Yi, visited India. This visit was crucial for trade as well as political relations because besides being president, Jiang Zemin was also the Chief Secretary of Communist Party of China and Chairman of Army Control Commission. During this visit, both nations signed 4 crucial agreements. During 1988 to 1998, due to the above courtesy visits and agreements, there were improvements at 3 levels: strategic, exchange and institutional, and improvement in trade relations. Due to these improvements, trade is continuously increasing between the two. Though the nuclear tests by India on May 11 and 13, 1998 caused the deadlock in the relations between the two, but due to certain economic and trade factors, this did not lead to the tension. And both termed this deadlock as temporary. Both were not in favor of distancing the relations. A new beginning of cordial relations. Due to international and bilateral compulsions, the gap of relations between the two was not prolonged. Rather, a period of cordial relations initiated. After 10 months, the dialogue between Chinese and Indian officials started in Beijing. In these years, besides official level transactions, prominent leaders of both the nations started mutual visits which helped in re-establishing the cordial relations between the two. The goodwill and agreements resulting from these bilateral visits increased intimacy between the two. In response to these visits, the prominent leaders from China, Li Peng and Prime Minister Chu Rung-ze visited India and took the relations forward. Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee's China visit during June 2003 was crucial. During this visit on June 23, besides signing a prominent document on principles of relations and comprehensive cooperation for developing new partnership, both signed on 9 other agreements. Chinese Prime Minister Wen Jiabao's India tour during April 9, 2005 strengthened these efforts. During this visit, China approved Sikkim as a part of India and presented Chinese maps. Both the nations signed on strategic and cooperation partnership for peace and development. For the first time, besides cooperation, both nations included strategic partnership in the mutual cooperation initiatives. Taking forward the initiatives of cordial relations, Chinese President Hu Jintao and Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh visited each other's countries in November 2006 and January 2008 respectively. To accelerate these efforts to improve the relations between the two, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited China during May 2015. During this visit, both the countries signed 24 agreements. Chief among them are protocol for establishment of consulates in Chengdu and Chennai. Above visits, exchanges and changing regional and international scenario had a very positive impact on economic, strategic and political sectors of both the nations. Therefore, during this period there was considerable development of cooperation and mutual coordination between the two. This was clearly visible from the steps taken by the two in different sectors and their mutual similar views. On economic front, bilateral trade between both is continuously increasing, which is evident from the steps taken like acknowledging the importance of joint economic group, formation of a joint study group, issuing the joint declaration letter, cooperation in the activities of WTO, and consent on including China under Bangkok Agreement. Development of cooperative attitude at economic, strategic and political level did not mean that now there were no conflicts or differences of opinion between the two. Even today, both have different opinions and methods on some issues. So, in this era, the Indo-China relations that were in a declining phase have moved towards a new partnership. For their future relations, the most important issue is to solve the border conflict. Unless the issues between the two is resolved, the long-run stable cordial relations between the two cannot be imagined. Problems. Despite above improvements in relations, both have conflicts over many issues. India has blamed China for encroaching 30,000 square kilometers of its land in eastern and 5,000 square kilometers in the western region. In the middle region, controversy is over autonomy of Tibet. The second point of conflict is about Tibet's position. The Dalai Lama and his associates are present in India in large numbers. This fact has always been painful for China. Though under 1954 agreement and later in its speeches, India has accepted China's rights over Tibet, yet the two causes of this controversy exist even today. India wants that Tibet's autonomy should be retained. In view of Dalai Lama's international respect, India cannot ask Dalai Lama and his associates to leave India against their will. Unofficially, people of India and even at official levels, there is acceptance and sympathy for them. The third important issue is related to supply of weapons to Pakistan by China and its support to Pakistan nuclear program. The issue of supply of M11 missiles with a striking capacity of 300 kilometers to Pakistan by China requires special mention. Besides other sources, Pakistan's nuclear program is supported by China also. According to some assumptions, Pakistan conducted its nuclear tests in China's Lucknow region. Besides, China has also supplied to Pakistan the magnetic rings that are used in making atomic bombs. This also indicates that Pakistan's nuclear power will be used against India only. So this is a matter of concern for Indian policymakers. Another problem between the two is supply of weapons to Myanmar by China. It is believed that China has been supplying large quantities of weapons to Myanmar which reach to the Maoists in northeastern region in India and become a danger for India. Despite increasing cooperation in economic sector, due to some basic reasons, there are many obstacles in the path of cooperation. To conclude this module, we can say that India and China are not likely to get involved in a direct confrontation in the near future. However, the possibility of bad turns in their relations cannot also be ruled out. India and China have long witnessed different kinds of phases in their relationship. Due to the recent Doklam standoff and due to the Tibetan issue in India, the relationship between both the countries need to be built on confidence building measures. But the ray of hope is economic relations between both the countries. The bilateral agreements as far as trade is concerned, it is going to have a big boom in the future. So we are seeing good economic relations in India and China.